Hi, Logan. This is not the first time I've recorded this video. I had a whole cup of tea that is now empty because I drank the whole thing recording the last video. I'm not upset about it at all. But as you can see on our YouTube channel here, the last time I posted a video was 9 months ago, and I talked about being a dragon. So I need to post something, and I have been inspired by your recent trend of whiteboard videos, and so I wanted to do you one better. And rather than ranking Super Bowl commercials, I wanted to be pretentious and rank every book that I read this year. I'm sorry. This I'm contributing something. Okay, so I've been reading a lot more, as my previous video said. I've been reading a significant amount since I graduated from undergrad, and I actually have some time and desire to read more. I've been able to kind of explore these new worlds and think about the ways that authors treat different topics, and that's always been something interesting to me ever since I took a class in high school where we tried to analyze the worldviews of different pieces of media. And so I decided that I was going to rank every book that I read this year. A couple rules. I got to get through this quickly because the last recording was like 35 minutes, and I don't want to do that again. A couple rules. One, both regular books and audiobooks count because I don't really want to try and remember which ones are audiobooks, and I also want to seem like I read more this year than I actually did. And I even though audiobooks engage a slightly different part of the brain for me, I still am able to take in these stories and appreciate them to a certain extent. Two, this will include textbooks that I had for school, which means that there's going to be some theology textbooks because I'm currently studying theology. So I'll talk briefly about those, but I know that that's probably not what most people are coming here for if they're trying to look at the books that I read this year. So I'll be brief with those. Rule number 3, they actually have to be books that I finished within the last year. So from June 2025 to June 2026. They have to be books that I actually finished, not books that I picked up and started but didn't finish, not books that I have not finished yet, or books that I'm currently reading. This has to be books that I finished reading within this last year. So there's about 35 of them. Let's go. First one is Authority. This is the lowest on the list. This is a book by Jeff Vandermeer. The first book in this series is ranked really high, and so you can tell how much I was kind of disappointed with this book because of how low this one is ranked. The first book, fantastic. This book, it was kind of boring. It lost me halfway through. It was a very different vibe. Didn't like it as much. Very interesting character study. That's about it. Second is There Is No Anti-Memetics Division, which is a book by a guy who decided to go by Quantum. Super cool. Nice. This is a book kind of based on SCP stuff, and I think it's interesting because it deals with monsters that affect memory, like the monsters that you forget as soon as you look away from, monsters that you can erase any information about themselves, those sorts of things. And so some of those are really interesting, but I feel like he got bogged down in the concept of the book and didn't really do a lot to develop the actual plot because I lost track of who was the main character halfway through the book. There was a turning point. Slight spoiler warning, so skip ahead like 10 seconds if you don't want to hear it. There was a point about halfway through the book where everything comes to a halt because it felt like the end of the book. And then I look at the time left and I see that I'm only 50% of the way through. And I go, wait, that's not right. So, after that point, though, I wasn't really as interested in the book. It felt kind of repetitive and I didn't really know what was going on. I kind of lost track and it kind of pittered out at the end for me. Next is The Children of Men by P.D. James. Interesting concept, good dystopian book, mostly kind of a thriller, so it didn't really have that much to offer. But it was interesting. Basic premise is that humans don't have children anymore, and we don't know why. And all of a sudden, somebody is pregnant, and they have to figure that out. That's basically all it is, though. It's just kind of like, whoa, that's weird. And there's some weird symbolism going on, but it wasn't my favorite. Breakfast of Champions by Kurt Vonnegut. I've read other books by Kurt Vonnegut, Slaughterhouse-Five, which was good, and Cat's Cradle, which was really good. Breakfast of Champions was meh. According to Kurt Vonnegut himself, this is kind of a C-tier novel, and I tend to agree. It didn't really have as much to say. It was kind of confusing at times, kind of disgusting at times, and not in a fun Kurt Vonnegut way, but in like we've been talking way too long about this disgusting thing for a while, and I really want to move on. So it just made me uncomfortable. Catch-22, which some people will lampoon me for having this low, but hear me out, okay? Really funny, laugh out loud moments, very creative characterization. However, he had one idea and one plot point and drug it out for 500 pages. And so at a certain point, I was kind of like, I don't really want to read this anymore. Because it's just, the plot moves at a snail's pace, which you might argue is the point, but it just wasn't that engaging for me. Everything else about it was fantastic, except for that. This is the first theology textbook. This is Making All Things New. It's about the doctrine of the church and the doctrine of the end times and how they interact. Interesting, but not stuff that was super new. It's stuff that I had heard people talk about many times before, and so this is a good introduction to the subject, but it's not necessarily like gonna blow your socks off or anything. 40 questions about church membership and discipline. Again, not a ton of really new stuff for me, but helpful introduction to the subject. I'll probably use this book in the future, but it was just kind of like, yeah, that makes sense. Narrative Art in the Bible by Shimon Bar Efrat. Similar situation where I was like, yeah, this is a lot of stuff that I already kind of know. But it's about how the biblical authors write their stories in the Old Testament. I think it was interesting. Very dry, but interesting. Readings in the History of Christian Theology. This one is fun because you get to read all sorts of works from the Reformation to the present and all these different theologians that talk about things. Cool, but not something that you just sit down and read through in one sitting because you're going to get whiplash. John Krakauer's Into the Wild. This was a gift for me from one of my teachers in high school, and I finally got to reading it this last year. And it was interesting. I think a lot of people on Goodreads review it based on the main character and not based on the book, which I think is kind of funny. Like, most of the reviews are whether or not they agree with what Chris McCandless did. I don't, but I don't think that was the author's point either. I think he was just trying to paint a complicated picture of a man, not trying to say whether or not we should follow in his footsteps. But interesting book. Not my favorite to read, but like did make me stop and think about a lot of things concerning faith and nature and societal expectations and family relationships and things like that. So definitely an interesting book to read. Spurgeon the Pastor. This is another book that's kind of just writing about a person. I thought this was good. It talked about how Charles Spurgeon managed a church of almost 5,000 people, which is impressive in its own right, but not necessarily an example I would love to follow, because Charles Spurgeon, while being a very faithful man, was also horrendously overworked and died very early because of it. And I have mixed feelings about that. Sojourners and Strangers is a textbook about church doctrine. It was just good. Like it just, yeah, good treatment of it. I would recommend. Histories and Fallacies by Carl Trueman. This is a good book about writing and reading history. Very fun at times, because he just talks about how weird certain historical fallacies are. But I definitely enjoyed it. It was fun and very helpful, I think. Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. This is a tough one because that it's ranked this low, because I loved Douglas Adams in high school. I thought that Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was like the best thing ever. And then I reread it a couple of years ago, and I was really disappointed with it, actually. Because even though it was funny, it didn't really have much beyond that. And this was a book that didn't even really have that much funny. So it just felt kind of like a dud, which is frustrating because I loved the TV series that Netflix did of this show, but it's just a completely different story. And so if you're expecting anything like the show, don't worry about it. This is not the same. The Astonishing Life of Octavian Nothing, Traitor to the Nation, Volume 1, The Pox Party. What a title. Crazy book. I love M.T. Anderson. Feed is one of my favorite books of all time, which I feel like is a controversial take based on reading some of the reviews for Feed. But I think it's really well done. His book, Landscape with Invisible Hand, is also a really interesting short novel about art in consumerist America, which is fun. This is very much not that. It's about slavery and history, the history of slavery in the Founding Fathers era. I feel like I'd have to read the other books in this series to really get anything from this one, and I don't really want to read the other books in this series, so sorry. I know you're one of my favorite authors, but I'm going to have to move on. Isaac Asimov's Foundation. Interesting. A lot of political stuff, which I think can be done very well, but this is definitely this is a world-building book, and I don't really like tons of world building stuff. I feel like it kind of gets people often get distracted in creating this world rather than telling the story that takes place within this world. I feel like this was an example of that. Lots of interesting twists in the novel that I enjoyed, but overall, probably not going to read the rest of this series. If that's not a complete 180, I don't know what is. This is Greek Grammar Beyond the Basics. It's a New Testament Greek book. Very helpful. That's all I can say. Although interestingly enough, the copy that I got has a bunch of notes from the previous owner. And it was funny how much I disagreed with him on so many things because he just had such strong opinions about things that I was like, dude, nobody believes that. Advances in the Study of Greek, again, New Testament Greek book. Very helpful for people going into biblical languages or just people who want to keep up with what is going on in the Greek scholarship. Never Let Me Go. This one's hard. This one and the next one are both hard because I think there was a lot here for me to enjoy, but it didn't really hit it for me. This is one that I feel like I'd have to revisit to really give a good rating for. Very interesting to take like a dystopian concept and then turn it into a slice of life sort of book. That's what it felt like. But hard. I don't really know what else to say. It was okay for me. And then this one is the same way. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is also another book. This is the inspiration for Blade Runner. This is another book that I was just kind of like, okay, I read that. They're pretty much tied, although I would put this one slightly ahead because of the sort of interesting way that the author explains artificial intelligence, where the main thing that sets people apart from robots is that humans have empathy. And so there's like this fake religion that's built around empathizing. They have an empathy box that they attach themselves to and watch this person's suffering, and they experience the same sort of injuries and stuff that the person is experiencing while he's suffering. I forget the name of the guy, but that part was interesting. And I feel like there's a lot more depth there that I need to explain and experience to really understand it, but probably would need to reread the book to get any of that. And I don't feel like doing that right now. History of the World in 6 Glasses. Very fun history read. I'm not really a history guy. I know it's weird because I have 3 books about history now currently in the lineup, but I'm not a history guy. This one was fun though because I work in coffee, and so learning about some of the ways that these different drinks affected social norms and the ways that they affected economy and trade and stuff like that was interesting, especially when it came to coffee and tea. I'm able to use a lot of the information that I got in this book to explain things to customers about coffee and tea, which is fun. But yeah, it's kind of just a fun book. This Present Darkness. I remember the first time I recorded this video, I talked a lot about this book. Okay, here's the thing, right? This is a book, very fundamentalist sort of coded, which is not a bad thing necessarily. But there's a physical realm. There's this small town that is experiencing a bunch of changes, and there's a spiritual realm that is affecting all of these things. And actually, right now I'm reading That Hideous Strength by C.S. Lewis, and it feels like a very similar story to that. And I wonder now if Frank got some of his ideas from that. But regardless, I, up until about 75% of the way through the book, I didn't think that the spiritual realm needed to be included at all. It became important later in the book, but through most of the book, I was kind of just frustrated with the constant like pulling of the camera back and looking at the realm of angels and demons and what they were doing. And there's a lot for me to disagree with in terms of how those things are organized. But if I take it as a fun story, it was fun. It was interesting. Labyrinth in the World of the Paradise of the Heart. I don't know if I said that title right. That did not sound right. But this is a great book by John Amos Comenius. This was an inspiration for Pilgrim's Progress, or at least most likely was, because it came out 50 years beforehand and it has a very similar concept going on. And as someone who's never read Pilgrim's Progress yet, this was really interesting, and I enjoyed it a lot. Comenius is a Czech man, and he is called the father of modern education, and he's someone that I'm fairly familiar with because I grew up in the Czech Republic, so it was really interesting to read something that he wrote. Super fun. Would recommend. Yeah, the first half of the book you kind of have to trudge through, but then as soon as there's a turning point where everything is just like, everything makes sense, all the details that you were like, I don't know why he's including this, just like pop. Very, very cool moment, I think. Words of Life by Timothy Ward, just a great discussion of the doctrine of Scripture. If you're curious about what Christians believe about the Bible, this is a good one. Deep Things of God. If this is great. I love Fred Sanders and his discussions of the Trinity, and this is a good book for anybody in the evangelical Christian tradition. Church and Its Vocation. Leslie Newbigin is a missionary to India that then comes back to England, and he is looking at all the ways that the English church was kind of messed up, and some of the pitfalls that Western society falls into in terms of church. Very interesting, super challenging, like, book to think about. I'll have to return to this one. This one was really good. Cultural Sanctification. I love this book. This one is about, basically the thesis is that the early church and how they handled culture is very similar to how we should handle culture. And so it talks about how the early church handled the intellectual life, how it handled political engagement, how it handled like theater and the arts and stuff like that. And I liked it. It was really good. I'm reading his other book about this sort of stuff right now because it was just fascinating. Now we're going to get to the Suzanne Collins portion of this episode. I love Suzanne Collins. Great author. Love the Hunger Games books. Love her other series, the Underland Chronicles, and both of those series are going to be in this list because I read her whole set of works this last year. Sunrise on the Reaping is probably the lowest rated, even though it is really good and almost made me cry towards the end. But it's kind of like the weakest Hunger Games novel out there. If Songbirds and Snakes was on this list too, it would rank way higher than this, but it was still fantastic. Love this book. Very first book, if you remember that, Authority. This is the first book that I was talking about. This one is fascinating. Super good. The author really captures the characters really very well, I think. And there's this one point towards the end of the book where the main character runs into the creature that she's been chasing the whole time. And it just wowed me. It floored me. It was so good. Great description. Great example of weird fiction and cosmic horror that just blew me away. So it's just a shame that the other two books in this series are not that good. I will not be reading the third book. I just was not interested enough in the second one to read anymore. But this book was fantastic. 1984. This was a book that I said I read in high school, and then it turns out that I just read a lot of summaries of it. So I actually read through the whole thing, and it's, it's a classic of literature, and so I think it kind of speaks for itself. But this book is elevated a ton by a video that I saw recently by Jacob Collier called Why Everybody Thinks That 1984 Agrees with Them. And I thought that was really fascinating. It just really helped this book in my brain, I think. 45-minute video-ish, but I was captivated throughout the whole thing because these sorts of things interest me, apparently. 1984, super good. Not the highest dystopian novel in this list, but definitely worth being this high in the list, I think. And then this is the book that inspired 1984. It's called We by Yevgeny Zamyatin. And it's like 1984, but better. Like the prose is beautiful. The characters themselves describe things in ways that make sense for their character. The main character is a mathematician, and so everything he sees is like every description is subtly infused with descriptions of geometric shapes and parabolas and stuff like that, and that's really cool to me. And it was just, it's a very similar story to 1984, but very different outcomes. And I thought it was interesting to read these two pretty close together. Here we go. More Suzanne Collins. The Underland Chronicles. If you have not read these books, they are so worth it. They're technically kids' literature. It's like 10 to 15 years old, but they're pretty advanced for what they are. And they are really intense. Like there's a decent amount of violence in these, which makes me hesitant to give it to a 10-year-old, but also just some great discussions for kids about war and when to fight and when not to fight, and genocide and the horrors of political rivalry that can happen, and racism and things like that. It's just really well done. There's definitely, this was written before Hunger Games, and there's definitely some moments where you can see how this may have inspired the Hunger Games. Great books. Speaking of which, yeah, I think these are just a masterclass of young adult dystopian, and nothing can ever live up to what Suzanne Collins put down. Divergent, Maze Runner, all of the other books like that just cannot live up to this. I'm sorry. This is just political rebellion, things of that sort. This series just does better than all of them. And I love this series. That's all I'm going to say. Paralandra, ooh, this is a tough one. Because I love it so much, but it is very heady and philosophical in a way that I think it can be kind of boring to read. But obviously it was interesting enough for me, even so, to put it this high. C.S. Lewis just has a way of describing things that makes them so incredibly vivid. Think like The Great Divorce. Great book. The reason it's not included with the rest of the trilogy is because I'm currently reading the last book in the trilogy, and I read Out of a Silent Planet way before I started, way before June of last year. So there's that. I love this book. Great discussion of sin and evil and good, and lots of interesting stuff about human identity and human brokenness and the struggle against ourselves, stuff like that. Really good. Love this book. Yeah. This is the last book on this list, and I don't really have a lot to say because I love this book, and most of you have probably read it and probably know why. This was a book that in high school, when they announced that we were going to be reading it and they gave us a summary of what it was going to be, I kind of like rolled my eyes a little bit because I heard that it was a book about a young girl who lived in the South, and there was a court trial, and it was kind of a slice of life sort of thing. And as a high schooler, I was kind of like, that doesn't sound really that interesting to me. And then I read it, and I could not put it down. And I was like, I judged this book so wrong. And so I reread it this last year, and it's just so incredible. I will be reading this book again. I really don't have that much to say that hasn't already been said, but just the way that it's written makes this story that doesn't seem like it should be that engaging compared to a lot of random fiction books that you would read. It makes it way more engaging than those. That's all I have to say. So, Logan, I hope this lives up to your standards of what videos are now. But in that case, I'm gonna go now. I have stuff to do today and I don't have time to record this video a third time. So, see ya.